I didn't have the awareness back then when I was doing this sexist sitcoms, and we didn't even know what sexism was. We knew about feminism and standing up for yourself, but we really didn't have the vocabulary and the permission, as it were, from ourselves to even think that way of, boy, this makes me uncomfortable that the woman is not being heard. Why is it that the man stays on the show and gets to tell the story and is believed? We didn't have that consciousness. Hi there, I'm Margaret Reed. You may remember me as Serova from the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Force of Nature. And this is Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I am your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. On today's show, I'm spending some time with a performer whose credentials alone should have you interested. She earned her MFA in acting from the prestigious Cornell University in a career that sent her back and forth traveling between New York and California for many, many years. We're lucky she crossed paths with Star Trek in an episode that is often talked about today by fans, and a role that this actor surprisingly still has some deep thoughts about. Margaret Reed played Dr. Serova from Star Trek TNG's 7th season episode titled Force of Nature. Her character was an alien scientist out to prove the dangers of warp travel to space, and ultimately came to a tragic conclusion. It was a fascinating looking glass into a different part of sci-fi that wasn't often shown in Star Trek in this way, taking the series and putting it into an environmental lens where the Federation might in fact be the bad guys. Fans still talk about this episode today and its implications, often saying it was a missed opportunity to do something even bigger with this touchy topic. Outside of Star Trek, you'll also recognize Margaret from her appearances on Law & Order, Seinfeld, The Golden Girls, Blossom, Empty Nest, the horror film Terrifier, which I certainly did not watch for this interview because I cannot handle something like that, and most recently, The Equalizer. She's played some memorable personas across her numerous roles and always brings her A-game to every set she walks onto. It goes without saying that Margaret has some good memories and excellent stories to share about all of these roles, and I'm very excited for you to hear them today. But before we start our chat with this week's guest, I want to remind you to please follow Trek Untold on social media, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find this show on all of those platforms simply by searching for Trek Untold. Make sure you subscribe to this show, whether that's on the audio platform of your choosing or on YouTube, where the video version of this show lives. And speaking of, make sure to check out our YouTube channel more frequently for episodes of our new mini show, Tales from Trek Untold, as well as other sci-fi goodies. And of course, don't forget to leave ratings, reviews, comments, and whatever you can do no matter what platform you're on to enjoy this podcast and show others that you're digging it too. If you want to support this show financially, please consider becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/trekuntold. Shout out to Trek Long Island, who is having their 2nd annual convention this summer at Hop Hog, Long Island, New York, from May 31st to June 2nd. Headlined by Melissa Navia from Strange New Worlds, Armin Shimmerman, Chase Masterson, and J.G. Hertzler from DS9, Ethan Phillips from Star Trek Voyager, and Gabrielle Ruiz from Lower Decks. Among many other modern and classic Trek shows, this 3-day event will feature autographs, panels, including some with yours truly, and other ways for you to hang out with the stars and meet your fellow fans. You can learn more about this event or buy tickets for it at treklongisland.com. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and beam in this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. And now joining us, she's come to us all the way from one part Oakdale, parts unknown in the deep universe. We're joined today by Margaret Reed. Margaret, how are you?
Good, Matthew. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Welcome to Trek Untold today. We got a lot to cover here because you've got quite a background, quite a lot of things I want to get into.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I do want to kick things off by asking you the same question I like to ask all my guests first. And that's, Margaret, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek? Were you a fan of the series growing up at all?
I was trying to think of that when I was watching your other interviews. I'm pretty, didn't everyone watch it? It was like one of the main things to watch. It was so innovative, and wow, let's see what we're going to be like in I don't know how many years in the future. I don't know those details. How many years do you know?
Many,
Was
many. I
the
mean, we're not too far off. We're in the Bell Riots times now, but we still have a few hundred years before we get there.
okay, okay, so we're not there yet. But yeah, I mean, I guess the first episode, of course, Captain Kirk and Uhura, and yeah, I is the what were they called? The Tribbles,
Tribbles.
Tribbles. Yeah, that's of course one of the most iconic episodes.
Everybody loves the
Yeah,
Tribbles.
I think I probably watched it every week, just like most of America.
Well, let's kind of jump into that a little bit more. I want to get some of the secret origin story, if you will, of Margaret Reed. So, can you tell us where you grew up, who your parents were, and what they did, and what little Margaret wanted to be when she grew up?
Oh gosh, wowie. I grew up in Salinas, California, your salad bowl of the world, where your lettuce and carrots and all that stuff for your salad comes from. Also, John Steinbeck's hometown. And I actually did one of his only plays in the basement of his house, which now they've made like a whole museum for him, but which was not there when I was growing up. But supposedly he haunted the house because people who lived there currently would see like rocking chairs going back and forth and cupboards being open and things. So, and also the Salinas Rodeo is very famous as well. Which I was never a part of. I wasn't really a big fan of it. I'd always go to Monterey, like when that would be happening. That wasn't my thing. So yeah, the town is pretty famous for a number of things. And I did theater. I started doing theater in high school, junior high actually, and musicals. Leading roles in musicals. And then I went to a school that didn't do musicals, University of California at Santa Cruz, which was very nearby where Salinas is, and in the beautiful, mountains there, and the ocean is like 5 minutes away. So it was a really idyllic place to go to school, but it really wasn't where my background had been from. So we were doing experimental theater. The teachers would bring in guests from New York and like create your own play kind of thing. And I'm like, could you please give me a song so I could just sing, and dance? So, but it was good. I have lifelong memories of being there and lifelong friends from, attending there. And then I went to Cornell, another beautiful campus, two gorges, running through Ithaca, and Ithaca College is also there. And I got my Master of Fine Arts there at Cornell in acting, and theater was my major at UC Santa Cruz. So also lifelong friends from that as well. Jimmy Smits, the actor from, LA Law and NYPD Blue, and most recently East New York. He was my Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew, and also Chief Bromden to my Nurse Ratched and Cuckoo's Nest. And of course, classes, classes every day. So that was a really wonderful experience. My dad was an insurance broker, who I didn't live with very much. My parents got divorced when I was 2.5. We lived in the same town, so I saw him every once in a while, and my two older sisters who went to live with him, and my sister who's the closest to me in age, we stayed with my mom. And my mom had different jobs in a bank and real estate and things. So, just trying to survive and get by in Salinas, California.
It's
So
interesting because a lot of folks, they come from New York and they want to go to California. You're doing it kind of the opposite way. You're going from California into upstate New York, by the way, folks, because Ithaca, New York, we're not talking 5 boroughs. We're talking 8-hour drive from the 5 boroughs into practically Canada.
exactly. And also California, where I'm from, is 6 hours north of what people think of California, Los Angeles. So I
Right.
was, 6 hours away. Going to LA was not even a thought, didn't even think to go there.
Yeah,
Felt drawn to the East Coast, the culture.
yeah, the interesting thing is we talk about Cornell a lot on this podcast, Cornell University, because I have some friends who went to Cornell, but they weren't doing anything related to theater or performing or arts. So for me, it's
Uh-huh.
always like the wildest thing to hear that there is this amazing program, and there has been this amazing program for decades at Cornell. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your time there, and especially you mentioned some of your fellow alumni. But what were like
Yeah.
some of the key lessons that you learned while you were at Cornell?
I'm wondering if you talk about Cornell because of Carl Sagan, because he was a graduate from there, I'm pretty sure.
I'm not too sure. I mean, as far as like actors in this show, we've had a few I can't think of off the top of my head. I believe William Sadler might have been a Cornell alumni as well.
Oh, I
There's
don't
a pretty
know.
big list of folks from the show who have done have done the Cornell thing and made it really
Yeah,
well, made a successful
yeah,
career after it.
yeah. Catherine Hicks on Seventh Heaven. She was from Cornell, the master's program. Our program, she was there before I was. It was a Master of Fine Arts program, and it really wasn't the thing that it is now. They built the beautiful performing arts structure, I think 10 years after I left. So we didn't have the opportunity to act there, but we acted in the old Willard Straight Hall on campus and the beautiful theater in there. And I I don't know. It was interesting that we had this group called American Mime Theater come up from New York, and they would teach us very disciplined. It was like really militaristic kind of these exercises that they would give us, and they would rank us every week, and that just gave us a lot of discipline and imagination work as well. It wasn't like this kind of mime, it wasn't like getting out of a box sort of thing. It was American Mime, which is a way of a company in New York of storytelling and entertainment. So
Would that be things like mask work and
we did mask work, absolutely, yes, and ballet and dance and fencing and Shakespeare and classical theater plus modern plays in the Boom Boom Room. And I didn't get to be a part of that because I was doing Penthesilea, which was a classical piece about Penthesilea, the Queen of the Amazons, me, and Achilles and all those guys. So it was a broad range of types of work that we were learning. So that was a big benefit. Yeah.
so after your time at Cornell, did you go right back to LA or did you stay for like the New York theater scene for a bit?
I was never in LA. I was never in LA.
Okay.
I grew up in Central California in Salinas.
I'm so used to saying LA in the show, Margaret. I'm so
Yeah.
used to like thinking urban California just is like that one area. But did you go back to Cali, let's just say, or did you stay to try and explore the New York theater
Yeah,
scene?
and we never called it Cali either.
That's those
No,
millennials ruining everything.
no, you guys are great. You guys are awesome. I could not go to my graduation at Cornell, I'm proud to say, because I was already working doing Taming of the Shrew again at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival in a traditional production. The production we'd done at Cornell with Jimmy Smits was a Viva Zapata sort of theme in the Mexican Revolution and everything. So I went to Colorado and did that, and All's Well That Ends Well as well, in this beautiful little outdoor theater at the University of Colorado there in Boulder, and then drove back across country. That was one of the times that I've driven back and forth across the country, back to New York, where I don't know the chronology exactly, but I got into the acting company, which was a traditional offshoot of the Juilliard School, and this was about the 11th year that was in production, and I was the first, again, I'm very proud to say, I was the first non-Juilliard student to be put into the acting company. And we toured around the country doing classical theater and Samuel Beckett premiere theater. And then when we got done with that, I was put in the Broadway off-Broadway production of another Samuel Beckett play called Catastrophe, and we did that off Broadway. And so I just stayed in New York, and but I did a lot of regional theater. I'd go out and do more Shakespeare with Elizabeth McGovern, and I did Twelfth Night at the Boston Huntington Theater. So things like that. And I would come in and out. And then I was like, you know what? I want to make some more money. So I'm going to start looking into TV. So I took some TV classes and I got onto Ryan's Hope a number of times with, Kate Mulgrew's show. That was the show, the soap opera that she did. And I didn't have any scenes with her. And then I just kept plugging away, trying to get on a soap. And then that's what led me to be on As the World Turns as Shannon O'Hara McKechnie for 7 or 8 years, whatever it was. I was on it for 5 years. Then I was like, if I don't go to LA now, I'm never going to go. So after those 5 years on As the World Turns, I did go to LA, and I was lucky enough to book a sitcom like the next week called Everything's Relative with Wendy Jo Sperber. And then the week after that is when I booked Seinfeld. So I was like, I love LA. I wish I'd come sooner. And Seinfeld was the 6th episode that they'd ever recorded. They, for some reason, put it in the second season
Yeah, it was
DVD.
like midway into the second season for some odd reason.
Yeah, but it was really only the sixth show. They had done four episodes before that, and NBC was like still trying to go, nah, do we pick this up? Do we not? And then finally they picked it up, and I was in the baby shower episode, and really let Jerry have it, and I'm so blessed to have that, on my resume.
Yeah, so we're talking Seinfeld right now, and it's kind of fun because you mentioned everything's relative, and that actually ties into Seinfeld because you did that with Jason Alexander. So,
Oh my
and
goodness.
you may or may not know that Jason Alexander is also a Star Trek alumni. He did an episode of Voyager.
I did
So
not know that.
there you go.
No.
So you guys are both Trekkies, and or at least Trek adjacent. But I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about Jason Alexander and working with him, especially at that age and where he is today in his career. Now he's like doing theater. He's so much more than he was back when he first began. But I'd love to hear any memories you have of working with him.
Oh, thank you for asking. And boy, you do your homework. I'm very impressed, Matthew. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, when I was doing As the World Turns, I had a week off in New York. We were shooting it in New York, and I had a week off from As the World Turns, and I happened to get an audition for some new sitcom, and I went in, and I remember saying to myself, if there are any actors listening to this, it was the first time that I said to myself before the audition, because you get so nervous, and I said to myself, you know what? How do I want to feel when I'm walking away from this audition? I want to feel like I did my absolute best. I rocked it as best as I could. And then I can just leave it up to, the casting gods and producers. And that's what happened. It really freed me up during the audition to just have a lot of fun. And I was working with it was to play John Bolger's love interest. Has John done any Star Trek? I'm not sure.
That I don't know.
He was on the Guiding Light. He was on Guiding Light. So which was a sister show to As the World Turns, a Procter and Gamble show. And so that was really cool. I booked that, and there's a big kiss that I end up having in Every Single Relative with Jason Alexander. And he was great. And when you say he's doing plays now, he was doing Broadway and theater, from the beginning. He's from New Jersey, and that's what, you go to New York to do the theater. And that's how he got his start. That Everything's Relative was also with Ann Jackson, Eli Wallach's wife. So that was very short-lived. It did not go, but my episode aired, and I was a bunch of scenes about the stock market and stuff like that. And I got to kiss Jason, and I remember I would slap his knee before I did one of my lines. He had to go, Margaret, could you please slap my knees a little less fervently? I was hurting him. But then to see him again 5 years later, I think it was, at Seinfeld, it was like, oh, we already knew each other. So felt part of like I was part of the gang already,
I like that story, how it kind of led to about the pressures of acting and the pressures of performing and being an artist. And I guess kind of want to take a little tangent now to dive a little bit deeper into that, because that's, I think, like one of the biggest hurdles that all creative people face is the constant feeling of pressure, whether that's externally or internally. And I'd love to know some more. I mean, I'm sure this is something that a lot of people deal with all the time. I'm sure you probably deal with that occasionally as well. How do you deal with the pressures of wanting to do something, but just feeling the weight of the world kind of just on your shoulders? And how do you
That's a
alleviate that
great
to make it
question.
better?
Yeah, I actually do have the weight of the world on my shoulders, don't I?
You currently do right now, yeah. You're currently Atlas. You're not the queen of the Amazons.
You're a very good listener. You're very, very good at
Thank you.
reflective listening. I really, really appreciate that. That's a skill that I think we all need to learn how to do in our lives, listening to people, reflecting back what they're saying. Yeah, I mean, we all have head trash, right? That's a term that my son's therapist came up with, head trash,
I like that term.
that I do too, or mind garbage is what I called it one time. There's just that stuff that goes on that, you're not good enough, you can't do it. Look at who you're trying to work with, impossible, you're not there yet, you'll never be able to, all that trash. So I have discovered what works for me is Headspace, the app Headspace, just to get into the practice of tuning into yourself, of taking those deep breaths and slowing down and, reflecting, just to get the practice of connecting with yourself like I also work with nonviolent communication. I assist the facilitation of classes now. In fact, we've got one coming up called Conversational Connection, and it starts next Thursday. It's on Compassionate Connecting website. James Prieto's teaching it, and I assist in that class. And it's all about self-empathy, which is not selfishness. Big difference, big differentiation. Slowing down, freeing yourself from reacting. And that's all the only way that you behave is just reacting to other people and not listening, and just, what do I need to say? So freeing yourself from that. And then empathy for other people and honesty in your communications. So I'm so grateful that that work came into my life during the pandemic, because I was seeking a way, because there was so much violence, and there still is, from certain political party. And I'm very much into voting rights and expanding voting rights and restoring democracy and humane treatment of people. That's why I love Nana Visitor's interview that you did with her, because I love what she stands for in terms of women and her womanism, feminism, and standing up for, we are not second-class citizens, folks. Some book that you've read might have said we belong to men, but that was written thousands of years ago. And let's update. Let's do an update, a reset on our where we are now as human beings. So that, I don't know what I don't know if you got that from the thing that I posted on Instagram last week of what I needed to do on set when I was on The Equalizer, shooting my 3rd episode last week, which is a dream come true of mine, to have a show that's shot in New York on primetime TV. It's on CBS. My big episode will air this Sunday, February 18th. I don't know when this will air, but
this will probably be
February
airing a few weeks after that point. But everybody should check out The Equalizer either way. If you didn't see it when it aired, catch the rerun somewhere.
Yeah, on Paramount Plus. Yeah,
Paramount, all right, home of Star Trek. So there you go, easy to find.
Yeah, and then I've got more episodes coming up as well. But when I was on set last week, I had come up after a headspace meditation that I'd done. I'd come up with, what's happening? How am I checking in with myself? If I get nervous, if I get head trash, let's just be present and be kind to myself. Not just be kind to other people, but to be kind to myself. Oh, that's what's going on with me. Okay, how can I support myself? How can I be my best friend? And that really helped me on set a lot. Thank you for letting me talk about this. I really appreciate sharing it, and revisiting that for myself. I really appreciate that, Matthew.
No problem. No problem. Well, I want to take a trip now to Oakdale, Illinois, because we already alluded to the fact that you were Shannon O'Hara McKechnie on As the World Turns for a whopping 8 years. I love talking to folks who've done roles for like periods of time as long as that. It's always amazing to get to spend just nearly a decade as that one character and really develop who they are. And also plus the stability, which is pretty great too. But during those 8 years on As the World Turns, I'd love to know, what did you learn about performing and what did you learn about yourself? Because that is a long time to be in one place and to be one person.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I'd come from a theater background, like I've said, did theater in high school, college, community theater, off-Broadway, regional theater, and you learn to tone down your performance for the audience. You're not reaching to the back of the theater anymore. You're just speaking one-on-one. Also, quickly memorizing things, quickly adjusting. That's very important as an actor, and you learn that on a soap opera, because you're shooting one episode that primetime TV, like The Equalizer, takes 10 days to shoot, and all the time in the world during that day, so long as they end in a reasonable time, but like 12, 14 hours for 10 pages. Whereas on a soap opera, you're shooting 60 pages in one day. So when people complain about the quality of it, I'm like, you try it. You try to tell a story believably of 60 pages in one day with the cameras moving around and everybody's shuffling and going, yeah, that's fine. That's good enough. We got to move on, because you have to move on. So the actor needs to be so prepared and yet so present in the moment to work off of maybe somebody not saying their line correctly, or, you got to like, move and adjust. And so it's a lot about adjusting, and, you get paid well for it. So, you're compensated for all the work that you're doing as well. So does that answer your question?
I think it kind of does, yeah, but it kind of brings me to another question, and that's, on that topic, did you feel kind of stunted then in that case, being this one character and having to be rushed, like, here's 60 pages, you got to do it today. Like,
Oh,
did you feel like you
no.
didn't really get
Oh,
to grow?
no. Yeah, no, no, no. I did not feel stunted. That's an interesting point. My character was really fun loving and kooky, and kind of, I got to do like this series of things with Sloan Shelton, where we were kind of like the Lucy and Ethel of the show. So we were like the comic relief, and so that was really fun. Because most soap operas don't have any comedy in them, and it's kind of hard to do comedy on a soap opera, because of the timing of it, which is, I teach sitcom and comedy. That's my specialty for coaching. I also teach drama, and a lot of my clients have booked, drama shows too, but that's what I specialize, multi-camera, like Seinfeld, sitcom training and script analysis. So no, I loved playing Shannon. She was always doing something different. They always wrote, fun things for me to do, and I never ever had that perspective of, oh, this is too small, or, I was very grateful for the job. Very grateful.
I do have to apologize, Margaret, because I've not had a chance to watch those episodes of As the World Turns. I try to do my
Oh,
homework as much as I can, but it was 150 episodes. That's a bit to squeeze in. But I do want to kind of throw this out there for the folks who are like serious As the World Turns fans who are hoping to hear something from you about this. And, you know, what's, I guess, the most commonly asked question you get if you go to conventions or you meet fans? Like, what is the one thing they always want to know about your time on that show?
I've never done a convention.
Oh, we
This
got to
one,
change that.
this one coming up in March, in March 1st and 2nd at the Burbank Marriott, is where it is.
That's the Hollywood
That
show, I
will be
believe,
my
right?
first. What?
That's the Hollywood show.
The Hollywood show. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That'll be my very first one. So I've been asking people for tips, and, like, how do you navigate this kind of thing? So, your question was about, what do I tell fans about what?
Well, basically, what's something that, if you meet a fan somewhere, like, what's the one thing that they always want to know? What's like the most commonly asked question you hear about As the World Turns that they're asking you?
Oh, they want to know about Duncan, the guy who played one of my husbands. Um, Michael Swan played that part. Duncan McKechnie. My character was called Erin Casey. That was her real name. And then she changed it to Shannon O'Hara, because on the plane from Shannon Airport in Ireland to Chicago O'Hara Airport, she discovered that her uncle was making her carry, we didn't know what, and the writers didn't know what. This was the first episode that I shot with them. But she was like, okay, I got to get off, and, I got to change my name because this seems pretty sketchy. So she changed her name to Shannon O'Hara, on that plane before she landed in Oakdale. So Duncan's storyline didn't come in for, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years after I was already on the show. So, but that's what people want to know, because that was a big, on magazine cover, couple, super couple. So that's what they want to know mostly. It's just what that relationship was like. Incidentally, he and I were boyfriend and girlfriend in real life.
That might be all folks want to know about that.
Yeah, as our characters were getting married on the show, one of the times, I think the final time, we actually in real life were breaking up. So navigating that was, but there was something in the water at As the World Turns. There was Mark Pinter and Colleen Zank, and a number of other couples got together on the show too. Don Hastings, Leslie. Yeah, so.
I'm kind of curious about this part too, because I've heard this happens a lot with performers who do soap operas for long periods of times. And respectfully, did you find it hard to get jobs after you had done As the World Turns? Because people are basically, thinking you're just this one person. They're typecasting you as that kind of character.
I don't think so, because, I mean, that's a good question too, because I don't think a lot of the people in primetime TV and other jobs that I don't know, you'd have to ask them. I mean, if they had a prejudice against that, I really have no idea. I think if they, once they see a good acting in an audition, they don't care, what your past has been. If it suits the project they're working on, I think they can spin it in such a way if they have to, to make it make sense for their show.
Attention all Starfleet personnel. New York's only fan-run Star Trek convention, Trek Long Island, is back this summer. Get ready for 3 days of sci-fi fun celebrating your favorite franchise in the Empire State. Meet the stars from Trek shows spanning different eras, including Melissa Navia and Yetidi Padaki from Strange New Worlds, Gabrielle Ruiz from Lower Decks, Armin Shimmerman, Chase Masterson, J.G. Hertzler, and Kitty Swink from DS9, Ethan Phillips from Voyager, Janet Kidder, Tara Rosling, Conrad Coates, and Elias Defexis from Discovery, and many more, including celebrities who haven't been at a Star Trek convention in years, like Clyde Kasatsu, Natalia Nogalich, and Daphne Ashbrook. Come meet your fellow fans. Take in a panel with your favorite podcasters. Enjoy Dinner with the Stars, featuring live musical performances. Meet authors, artists, and musicians, and so many more during this epic 3-day event brought to you by the talented and inclusive community that makes Star Trek go at warp speed. Trek Long Island takes place from May 31st to June 2nd at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Hauppauge, New York. Visit treklongisland.com for tickets, exclusive packages, and more information. Trek Long Island, going kindly this summer.
Margaret, I know you checked out one of my episodes. You talked about the non-visitor one a while ago, but typically on the show, we talk about a lot of non-Trek things. And if you watch probably any other episode, you would have heard this question. But I love to talk to people about their time on the Golden Girls. And I know that you did an episode of Golden Girls in season 7. That was Dateline Miami. You were a pregnant woman. I know it was a quick scene, but I mean, you still got to be performing right next to Betty White. So I'd love to hear any stories you got about working with her.
Yeah. How much time do you have, Matthew?
For Betty White, as much as you need.
She was just delightful. She wasn't like hanging out with us. I mean, it was the 7th season and they were all like, 7th and final season. They were all pretty much like, yeah, okay, let's just get this done. And, we have other things we need to do in our lives. Just like Star Trek was, that was the 7th season as well, The Next Generation. And, she reminded me in a strange way of my mother, who did not have the capacity for humor that Betty White had, if I can put it that way. Just a tragic childhood and, how generational trauma, follows us all. But in another, just maybe kind of how she looked or just certain rhythm of her behavior, a warmth in both women, both my mom and Betty White. So that was really fantastic. But if I can tie it into Nana Visitor, sure. This is the one of the many roles that I played as guest stars where that do not pass the Bechdel test. Do you know what the Bechdel test is?
Yes.
It's that the women's role is not just in service of or connected to a man.
Right.
Somehow.
Like they're having conversations with each other. They're not talking about love interest or anything like that. They're actually having meaningful interactions.
As human beings, as opposed to second-class citizens, married to a man, worried about a man, trying to get a man, what the man's done to them. As my character on Golden Girls, I got knocked up by my professor. And I come in way pregnant, which at the audition, I decided to be like, okay, I'm going to be really pregnant, like about to drop. And I think that's why I got the part, is because I was like, this has to happen now. We have to have this conversation now. And it's a story about Pat Harrington, who was on One Day at a Time. He's dating Betty White, and 3 of his ex-lovers come into the scene, and I'm one of those ex-lovers. The last one turns out to be a guy, which was like a big, ooh, homosexual. We're talking about homosexual. That was huge in that year. That was, I don't know, 1992 or something.
Like 93 or 94. Yeah. You might have been earlier than that.
That's when it aired. That's when it aired. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was the knocked up student, and I'm like, please talk to me. Please get back together with me. I can't do this without a man, please. And he's like, be careful of how you speak to me. I haven't graded your final exam yet. So it's like not only misogyny, sexism, but it's terrorism, and we're all laughing. We're all like, oh, isn't that funny? Whereas now it's like a script like that would hopefully never pass through anyone's fingers into their computer, let alone if they get it that far, past a producer or, producer's desk. Because, I mean, it was really just awful how we laugh at misogyny that's what's led us to this period now where we are now, with like people trying to control people's medical decisions and healthcare. It's like, you have no right to say what anyone else does with their body. Just go worry about the climate, please. Put all that energy into the climate, and so that we can all live and breathe and have clean water. Wouldn't that be a better place?
Yeah.
Then, so anyway.
I mean, do you have a hard time looking back at some of your work, just thinking about things like that?
Yes. I feel bad that I contributed to where we are now by taking those roles. But you know what? Another thing about nonviolent communication is we're all doing the best that we can with the skills that we have at the moment, And so forgiving myself, forgiving those writers, forgiving the people now that are making these, terroristic rules against women's health care. We're all doing the best we can, and hopefully on a path of learning and growth, away from anything that is harmful to other human beings. That's my slogan for my political campaign.
Margaret Reed approves of this message.
Right.
I do want to ask about one last thing before we get into our Trek talk here, and that would be just the role of Blossom's mom from Blossom. I grew up watching Blossom, and I was looking through your resume, and I was like, wait a minute, you were Blossom's like actual mom, which I think she only appeared like once, right? But I just love to hear any memories you have of being part of that show and really being in that role, because that's kind of a critical role. That's since he's not really there. I mean, it's kind of an important one that we don't really think about or talk about as much.
There you go. Your Blossom history too. Yeah, and I love seeing Maya Bialik now doing her podcast, The Breakdown, about mental, health issues. She's just an incredible person. I loved her on Star Trek. She wasn't on Star Trek, on Jeopardy as the host. She was fantastic. You know how difficult it is to be that present, to be
right,
I mean, just like Ken Jennings is doing now. It's like he improvises with people, and he's like, just to be on all those buttons they have to pay attention to. It's just, anyway, I'm so proud of her, if I can be, and all she's accomplished since then. Barnard Hughes played my father, and Ted Wass was my husband, their father, and it was in the flashback episodes of what happened when she left the family. So that was just Ted. I think Ted directed that episode. I think maybe, but yeah, it was just really well-run show. I thought it was well-written show. Told the history really well, and I had some great scenes with Ted. And I don't think I was in scenes with the kids, but if I was, it was like Joey Lawrence's younger brother, actually in real life.
Matthew Lawrence.
Matthew Lawrence, yeah. I don't think I was in any scenes with them, but it was implied, that I was their mom way back then. And then Melissa Manchester played it a year later in the episode where they went to Paris. I was like, oh, darn it. Because I couldn't possibly play it because I wasn't old enough. She's older enough.
So, Margaret, let's beam into our Star Trek discussion now, and that is your role as the alien scientist Serova in the 7th season TNG episode Force of Nature, which was kind of a fascinating one, really relating to the potential dangers of warp speed. A lot of technobabble in this one here, but before we get into that, I want to ask you, Margaret, had you auditioned ever for Star Trek before this role?
No.
First time?
First time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about that audition process?
Oh gosh, I remember going to the Paramount lot, which is just, I'm tearing up now. I'm just emotional because there's the history of being able to go onto those lots in Los Angeles is just, it's just a memory and just an experience that is so unlike any other experience, because you feel just like going into when I did Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike, the play. We went to the Cape Playhouse, and just all the old people that had played there, all the posters that were backstage and everything. So going onto the Paramount lot was just so magical, just trying to savor every moment. And I remember going in, I think I was a little afraid, but they were also auditioning other characters, which is, I love when casting directors do that. They don't have a bunch of me, sitting in the hallway waiting. It's like other actors are auditioning for other characters. And it's just it takes a weight off actors' shoulders when the casting directors do that, because you're not just sitting there going, oh gosh, she has blonde hair. Do they want blondes? All that head trash again. So I remember feeling really good about that audition. And I don't remember how soon after that it was that I booked it, but I think that was my last job in LA.
Really?
Yeah, before I went back to As the World Turns on the East Coast.
Huh.
Pretty sure that was my last job. Yeah.
Well, that's a fun way to go out before you head back over to the soap, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, just personally, for the environmental, emphasis that I have in my life to help our planet, that my character was, trying to save the solar system from pollution because of warp drive. So, you got to drive more slowly, because, warp drive is polluting the solar system. And I had to, in my mind, kill myself in order to prove my point, so that's what Serova did. And then, my brother, Rabal, stays on to mansplain the whole thing, even though I'd explained it, and had to kill myself, because if a man says it, then it's going to be true. But the woman's bringing us the information. So I don't know. She's just crazy broad telling us about warp drive. So again, sexism, is right there.
I'm glad you brought it up. I do have some more questions about that. I want to get to that in a minute, because there's a lot I want to unpack about this episode here, but I do want to talk a little more about the practicalities first. And I'm curious to know, had you ever done like a lot of prosthetics before you did this episode of Star Trek? Because for this episode, you are wearing some alien makeup here and a weird hairpiece.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna bring that out. I actually still have.
Oh, you have it.
The rubber prosthetics. Would that be something somebody would want to buy?
Are you kidding me?
Because it's just sitting in a scrapbook for me. I don't really need it.
There's a lot of salivating Trekkers and Trekkies listening to this podcast right now. Take my word for it.
Okay. Yeah, it was a forehead down here, down my nose. I think there was something here. It took 3 hours to do, which I'm sure, my friend Melanie Smith, I'm sure I looked at her makeup for Deep Space Nine, and I'm sure hers was a lot longer. And then it took about an hour and a half to take off each day. So it was a whole process. You lay on a table and they do a face cast of you, and whatever material that is, paper mache, I guess. So you can't breathe. You got straws up your nose, and I have a picture of me, like a me profile with that mask, that I could send you if you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the things up my hair. Yeah, it was a whole process. It was cool.
And by the way, we had Melanie Smith on the show. She came here and talked to us about being Tora Zial. So yeah, I think her makeup time was pretty similar to yours, which it is surprising that yours would be like 3 hours. Because when you look at like your face compared to somebody like Armin Shimmerman, or like the work that would go into Brent Spiner as Data, you would think like,
how did he do that?
Yeah,
how did he do that every day? How did that makeup? I mean, he was just fantastic. I'd like to talk about
special kind of person to be able to sit in that chair and do that for 7 years.
Talk about meditation. Yeah. Yeah, Melanie and I are good friends. In fact, we're going to be sitting near each other at this convention on March 1st. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell her Trek Untold says hello.
Because we have the three things in common: As the World Turns, Seinfeld, and the Star Trek universe. Yeah. So I'll tell you some hello.
Hey everybody, we'll get right back to the interview in 1 second, but I wanted to remind you all to check out Trek Untold over at Patreon. Patreon is the best way to directly support creators of things you like through a monthly subscription of an amount that you can choose. Trek Untold has a few different tiers already with different benefits, ranging from early access to episodes, the ability to ask a future guest questions, exclusive merchandise, and other bonuses that I'd love to offer, but first I need to grow that Patreon community to do that. Trek Untold has been around since mid-2020 and has grown a ton since then, thanks to listeners and viewers like you. Through a platform like Patreon, you can help me keep improving the quality of each episode and keep bringing you new interviews with folks that make the Star Trek universe what it is. If this community can grow more over on Patreon, I can offer new perks like watch parties, exclusive Trek Untold episodes, being able to directly interact with guests, and other things, but in order to do that, I need to know my audience wants these things. The best way to tell me what you want is by supporting us on Patreon, so please, check us out at patreon.com/TrekUntold today and become a bigger part of the Trek Untold family. And now, back to the interview. So again, this is kind of the first time you've done something like this big and this sci-fi-ish, I guess let's say.
Oh yeah.
So like walking around the sets, wearing this makeup. I mean, what did you think of this environment that you're on? Because this is, it's pretty different than I imagine a lot of shows you've done in the past.
Well, no comparison. Yeah. It was just like the coolest thing. I mean, to be able to actually physically like talk about mask work. This was reminded me of when I was at Cornell and we were doing the mask work, because it really alters your rhythm, your posture, everything about your being, because it really helps. It's kind of like you hear stories of English actors like Laurence Olivier. He'll put a nose on, and that'll like really inform, how he looks at the world. When you're doing theater, it often helps to have the shoes in rehearsals, because that changes how you walk. So yeah, this was amazing, walking around the Paramount lot. I actually went to I took a break one day and I went to the casting office so that I could show them, what I looked like, because they were on the Paramount lot as well, Jeff Greenberg and oh no, they weren't the casting directors for that show. Junie Lowry Johnson was the casting director for that show, but Jeff Greenberg had auditioned me a lot for other shows, for Frasier. I was up for Perry Gilpin's part on Frasier, and a number of other shows. So anyway, yeah, it was really cool.
And we also should mention that you got to spend some time on screen with Sir Patrick Stewart, with the amazing LeVar Burton, and of course your scene partner as your brother slash mansplainer, Michael Corbett. So I'd love to hear any memories you have of the folks you got to work with during that time there. And by the way, do you remember how many days that shoot was for you?
For me, I think it was 3 or 4. For Michael, it was the whole 10 days.
Okay.
I think, I don't know. You'd have to check with him.
That sounds about
but
right.
It was longer than I worked. And he was really cool. I liked working with him. I liked being his sister. He was a very, very nice guy. And so was Patrick Stewart, just like totally there, just right. I remember with my character, when I chose to say research, which I think is how the British say research. And then his next line you'll see in the scene, he's like, the blah, 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 the research that blah, blah, blah. Because, I mean, he is doing a British accent on the show.
I mean, it's basically his accent. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so
I think by that point, season 7, he probably started to get like more of an American accent. So you were a few years late.
Yeah, you're picking up on what I'm putting down. Yeah. But you'll see in the scene that I say research, and then he says, well, your research. So I don't know if he was trying to like teach me something or, but I didn't pick up on it. So anyway, yeah, he was very nice. And LeVar was very, let's get on with it. Let's do the day. Let's keep working. It was Bob Lederman was the director, and he wasn't normally a director. I think he was normally director of photography or camera operator or something. So I think that there was some kind of tension going on that day, maybe because of that. I don't know what. This was the day when we, what's it called? Transported?
Yeah, when he beamed up.
When we beamed up onto the, was it the Enterprise?
Yes.
Okay. You guys know so much better than I do. It was that day, and I don't know what was going on, but it was just kind of an icy sort of set that day. Patrick Stewart wasn't there that day. So anyway, who knows? Maybe somebody had indigestion. I don't know.
So let's take a moment now to talk a little bit more about your character here, because yeah, I agree that this is, again, watching it now this many years later, it's a tough one to watch. And, I've looked at a lot of Star Trek, and I've seen that there's lots of characters who've done like the ritual suicide, that kind of thing. I mean, even in this current season of Trek Untold, we've talked to a few folks whose characters commit ritual suicide. And as a plot device, I don't know how I feel about it, especially, I feel like in the 90s for sci-fi shows, it wasn't that uncommon, but today it's kind of tropey. So, again, for your character, I mean, like you were saying, this is like a very smart, enlightened scientist, but nobody believes her. Do you feel like the character was just written that way to kind of be unbelievable, and that her words didn't matter, and it was only really the brother's words that matter ultimately? Like, what was your take on this kind of complicated scientist?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, yes. What you just said, that yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it is sexist. It is, I don't know if it's misogynistic, but it is sexist that the woman, is the leader in the initial talks Like, please, you have to let us do this. We know better. We've done this research. Let us do this. Like I'm closer to Patrick Stewart physically in that scene than Rabal is. Rabal's behind me, Michael Corbett. But then, once and I'm sorry, I think I might have said commit suicide, which is not the thing to say. Died by suicide. That was her method to prove her point. She was willing to be that engaged in saving the planet and saving the solar system from pollution. That she took herself out, to prove that point.
So I guess, on that note, then, I mean, as you're playing this character, as you're reading the lines, what's going on in your head? Because again, this is a character who's, so smart, knows so much, but nobody believes her. That's got to be so frustrating. I mean, did you pull in any real life experiences, or was it just kind of like, this is my job, I got to do this?
Just being a woman, being a girl and a woman in the world at that time. From birth, our thoughts are devalued, our actions are devalued. What we bring to the table, nurturing and intelligence and emotional intelligence, is devalued by the male, the patriarchy. So now that we're more aware of that, it's lovely because I'm like, oh gosh, that's why I felt so imprisoned, so trapped. But you can't talk about it either, because then you're whining and you're a bitch and whatever, just for saying, hey, this is my honesty, this is my truth. Which of course we didn't have that language back then. And I didn't have the awareness back then when I was doing the sexist sitcoms and sexist Star Trek, and we didn't even know what sexism was. We knew about feminism and standing up for yourself, but we really didn't have the vocabulary and the permission, as it were, from ourselves, and certainly not from the patriarchy, to even think that way. Of, boy, this makes me uncomfortable that the woman is not being heard. Why is it that the man stays on the show and gets to tell the story and is believed? We didn't have that consciousness. Now we do, thank goodness. And people are fighting like hell against it. It's like, let's stay with the patriarchy. Let's do, and we're like, doesn't work anymore. Time's up on the patriarchy. And I know it's an adjustment. You got to adjust to it, but it's like, it's here now. And we all need to accept it. And our world will be a much better place if everyone is valued. Everyone's thoughts are valued. If there isn't just one woman on the Star Trek inner circle, if there are more, like that's why it was wonderful when Kate Mulgrew and Nana Visitor, they were the people in charge. And it wasn't like a second thought. It was like, oh, of course, they're just people, whether they're female or male, and they're just as capable. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. And, there's a lot of Trek fans out there. We're a fairly enlightened fan base, but there still is a pretty big division between one way of thinking versus another way of thinking, 90s progressivism versus progressivism in 2020s. And, I have a lot of actors who I speak to on this show, and they were working in the 80s and 90s, and they tell me, and and in particular, I'll talk about people of color who were saying, they have to play the thug, the pimp, the hooker, etc. But it was like a means to an end. And in the case of like a lot of white women, especially, they had to play those shrill women who were like reviled because they were strong. And the thing is, they were often written to be that way. They weren't written to be strong characters. They were written to be bossy, mean kind of characters. Whereas, yeah. So I'm kind of curious to know what's your take on it, because you're saying that, it is a little bit hard to look back on some of those roles. Was it ultimately a means to an end? And would you have done it again if you had the choice?
When you say a means to an end, do you mean my
like kind of just like furthering your career kind of thing, like, yeah, it's like you have to work, you got to get a job, right? You got to keep working, you have to be seen. So it's like, take the job or not take the job. What was it worth it in the end, and would you do it again?
I would not do scripts like that again, and I don't think they would be approved in the first place. I would hope. Yeah, I guess it was a means to an end. I mean, it was like, yay, I got a job, let's do it. And like I said, there was no consciousness back then of like, this is sexist. No, you just didn't even, like my role in Seinfeld, it was all like geared toward this 3 years of vengeance that I'd been plotting against Jerry because he didn't call me the next day. like her whole life is like geared around the fact that this guy didn't call her, as opposed to like, yeah, he's a loser. He doesn't know what he's got, here, or, we're just not meant to be together, like there's so many other choices she could have made, but she chose to like stay on this vengeance track, which is very funny. I don't know if you guys have seen the episode or not, but it's very fun to do. And yeah, but yeah, no, I wouldn't do those kinds of scripts again. In fact, I notice it all the time when I'm coaching my clients. Somebody came to me with a script that was 2006, and it was John Lithgow and Jeffrey Tambor sitcom with Judith Light, and Judith Light's character is all about, please marry me, Jeffrey Tambor character. But she was a strong woman, but she was like, there were other men who were attracted to me, so I want you to, marry. It's like, it was all about the man, and whether she would be with the man. And that was 2006. So hopefully we've progressed and there aren't any scripts like that anymore. It just makes me cringe now. It's like, there's so much more to women and people than just catering to the patriarchy.
I mean, I was going to actually follow up with that, since you are coaching people today and you're also still working. Do you feel like things have gotten better? And if not, or if they have, maybe not enough, what do you think will be the step to get it to a point where everyone really actually is treated equally?
Well, I think shows like Star Trek, that show the future, if they like show the future in a more equitable way, with Black leaders, Asian leaders, Latinos leaders, women,
Kind of like
whatever.
Star Trek Discovery and Strange New Worlds these days.
Yeah, yeah. And the Equalizer. What I love about the Equalizer is that every one of the major characters, the 6 or 7 of them, none of them is straight white Christian. And that's awesome. There's just like every so often, often me, Philip Kasnoff, who's in this episode that's going to air on February 18th. They're just, the white people are peripheral, we're the secondary cast. And I love that, because it's not made a big deal of either. It's not like, oh, look at this multiracial, diverse cast we have. It just is. And they're, everybody's capable. They've got wonderful stories that they're telling, and they tell them really well. So I'm just so happy that not only this career dream of mine to have a recurring role on a primetime TV series on CBS is coming true, but that it's also attached to my values and what I believe, where I believe the world needs to be, and to honor people and treat people humanely, and like we're people as opposed to race, which is a social construct. The idea of race is a social construct made up by white people. So that's a whole other podcast.
To kind of pull things back into Force of Nature for a minute and look at that as a whole, this episode in particular, it's not one of the more beloved ones from the creators I read. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but like a lot of the creators, a lot of the show creators, they weren't too fond of how it came out in the end. And that's not because of any of the performers. It's because they kind of felt like the script maybe just had too much going on and didn't quite achieve what they wanted it to achieve. Since the goal was like this environmentalism message, but it was kind of quagmired in the Data subplot about his cat. We had the story going on with you guys. And to be fair, like watching it again, it's like there's a lot of different pieces here. I feel like they don't quite meld. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts were on the episode. And again, like everybody's performances were great. It was just like the story itself didn't really quite glue together. But what did you think about the episode as a whole? I don't know if you watched it when it came out, but what did you think about it? And if you could change anything, what would you have done differently about it?
How will you know what I would have done differently?
I already know, but I want you to say it.
But I will say it again. That's an interesting perspective. I had no idea. I wonder if that was because of the script or because of the new director, or or what. It sounds like a conceptual thing, because most TV episodes have at least 2 storylines, if not 3. Mostly all. If you like watch any TV at all, they mostly always have at least 2 storylines. So it depends on which one gets the emphasis, right?
Yeah, and in the case of this episode, though, for me at least as a viewer, it felt like these stories were so just disconnected from each other.
Yeah, they're very disparate. Yeah. to make it different, I would have had Raval die by suicide, or maybe not even die, but like make some big ruckus, and then have Serova, explain, be accepted, be heard, be seen, be acknowledged, be honored, that she's bringing this great information, and what can we do now with it. So maybe that would be, and so, because I think by the end of the episode they agree to drive more slowly or something, don't they?
Yeah, kind of, sort of, but never really affects much beyond that episode, unfortunately. Yeah, it's
Right.
kind
It
of a
doesn't.
lackluster ending too. It's like, here's this great big environmentalist message, but really, meh.
Yeah. So that would be changed as well, and that Serova would stay on to make sure that proceeds into future episodes.
Yeah. It's kind of
That's
interesting
another
because
thing I would have changed.
when I think about this character and I think about Serova, like if she was on Deep Space Nine, I think it probably would have been just the way you described it. And especially because it would have been such a much more fun character arc to watch in this episode, to see you stay on board and suddenly you change your character in a way that they start to realize, oh, she's not this mean, shrill person. She just wants to get her message across and we're not hearing it.
Yeah, exactly. And then some kind of love story could happen, and could
And you stay
develop
on
in
for
all
the next
kinds of
3 seasons, and there's the spin-off, and
hey, I would have done it. I would have done it. Well, maybe the new one could be developed.
there you go.
Remember Serova? She didn't really die in that explosion.
She's fine. She just floated away. You got lost in space. She's back now with the Robinsons.
She put all of her particles back together somehow.
She's smart enough. Why not?
Absolutely.
All right, so Margaret, it's time for the lightning round now. We've talked Trek, but now we've got a whole lot of other things to run through real quickly here. We call it the lightning round, but this is far from it. These are the worst questions in the entire interview. So let's kick things off here with best day on the job and worst day on the job. And that can include theater as well as TV or film.
Oh, gosh. One of the best days on set was that I had just gotten out to LA, and I had already gotten another sitcom, Everything's Relative. And then the next week I came into audition for Seinfeld. They were sitting on a couch. It was a very small room. There was Jerry and Larry Charles and Larry David, and I'm screaming, and Mark Hirschfeld, the casting director, and I'm doing the scene with Jerry, and they say, "Can you wait outside?" And I say, "Yeah, sure, of course." And I see other women go in and leave and go in and leave, and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? They bring me back in, I do it again, and then they're like, "Yeah, thank you very much." And I'm driving off. They had been in production for that episode for 2 days already, and I'm driving off, and my agent calls me and says, "Get back to the set, you're on, you got the job." So I was there to try to fit in. They'd already been working for 2 days and bonding and everything, and I got back to set on the same day that I auditioned for Seinfeld. So that was really cool. That's what every actor envisions with every audition.
And how about worst day?
Well, um, these are tough questions. There was someone on the Star Trek set that was putting off like just bad energy, and like I made a joke after we transported, after Michael and I transported onto the Enterprise. I don't know what the joke was, but everybody looked to this person to see if they were laughing, and they weren't. And so there was just like this chill that like came over the set, and I was like, oh, I guess I shouldn't make any jokes. So it was just like, was so weird, and so like I didn't know what was going on, and I felt like I'd made this huge mistake, and so that was really kind of set the tone for the rest of the days that I was on the show. I was like, oh, I gotta watch myself.
Well,
I
that's
was kind of
unfortunate.
sad.
Yeah, it's
Made me sad.
unfortunate, but it happens, I guess.
Yeah. So,
How about the role that you are most proud of that you've ever done? If there's one role that you would tell my listeners, my audience, to check you out and say that is the best work that Margaret Reed has ever done, what would that role be?
well, I don't. You're gonna make me cry now. I don't know what how the scenes are gonna turn out for the Equalizer, but I'm so proud of having manifested this role in my life, and I have 2 great scenes coming up February 18th, the It's the fourth season opener. It's the season 4, episode 1, called Truth for Truth. And I have 2 great scenes with Queen Latifah and some other activity in the show. I'm hoping they're going to be really great work. But yeah, I'm just pleased with it happening in my life. And you tell me if it's the best work that I've ever done.
You're making me verklempt, Margaret. You're making me verklempt over here.
I'm verklempt too.
Well, let's see if we can make you even more verklempt. Margaret, what's the most valuable lesson that somebody taught you about life or your profession that you still think about and use today?
I kind of wish I had these questions before the show so I could think of it. Can you think of something like that right off the top of your head?
That's why I'm the interviewer, Margaret, and not the interviewee.
Okay. Yeah, from nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's work, self-empathy, checking in with yourself, putting your oxygen mask on first to see what's going on, why I'm feeling that way, what need is it that's not being met, and before you get into any kind of strategies about how to fix it, pausing, being patient with yourself. Why am I upset? I'm feeling upset because my need to be heard is not being met. Looking into that. And then if it's with someone else, what could their needs possibly be? They seem upset. They seem to be sad because their feeling for belonging is not being met. So I highly encourage everyone, if they want to free themselves from reactivity and learn how to communicate better and be kinder to themselves as well, to look up nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's work. So that would be just part of that work that is very valuable for everyone, and me in particular.
And last thing for today, Margaret, what's the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe? There's a softball for you.
Doing interviews like Trek Untold is the best part of being part of the Star Trek universe. Just I don't know, I guess the sense of belonging, that need of mine is being met, the sense of a community, of a fascination, of everybody who watches it and is enthralled by it, belonging to that universe, as it were, even if I'm just a small cog who is trying to save the environment for everybody.
Well, I know this episode of Trek Untold isn't going to air until after your first official Trek appearance, but I hope it goes really well for you, and I'm sure that it will, because like you said, you're part of this universe, and if this is your first time doing it, especially, folks are going to want to meet you, they're going to want to hear your stories. So I wish you the best at the event, and thank you so much today for chatting with us and giving us all your great stories about Trek and so much more beyond that, and hopefully we'll see you at more conventions throughout the next few years, right?
Oh, yeah, sure, we'd love to. And thank you, Matthew. You are an excellent interviewer. Your reflective listening skills and your interest in the person and the research that you do. I hope you keep this part on the, in the podcast, because you really did a terrific job, and you made me feel heard and seen and acknowledged and respected. And I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. This is definitely the part of the show that I always keep in because it makes my head feel nice and big, but I'm happy that you enjoyed it too.
Self-empathy, Matthew. Take it on.
Get that mind trash out.
You're being appreciated.
Well, thank you so much, Margaret.
All right, take care.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you for checking it out. Don't forget to follow us on social media, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Trek Untold, and subscribe wherever you are listening to or watching on. And that includes the audio versions on whatever platforms that might be, and our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TrekUntold. If you'd like to support this show financially, please consider visiting patreon.com/TrekUntold to become a member of this show. And along with getting access to all sorts of wonderful perks, you'll also know that you're helping out this show continue to thrive, survive, and make new content all the time. Shout out to Scott Ray for connecting us with this week's guest. If you want to book them for an event of your own, email scottray67@aol.com. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz. This has been Trek Untold. Thanks for watching. And until next time, always remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars, is powered by the Rageworks Podcast Network and affiliated with Nerd News Today.